welcome back. If you're new around here, my name is Heather. I am a crime writer. This channel is where I talk about books, the supernatural and true crime. Today's episode is Supernatural Saturday and we're going to be talking about the Enfield Poltergeist. If you enjoy true crime, supernatural, book discussions, I occasionally talk about social stuff. If you like that kind of stuff, subscribe and let's get into the video. The story of the Enfield Poltergeist begins in Enfield, London, 1977, when single mother Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children moved into their new house. She went upstairs one night to tell her 2 daughters to stop roughhousing and go to sleep. She'd already been up once that evening to tell the young boys, Johnny, who was 10, and Billy, who was 7, to stop complaining that their beds were wobbling and not to be so ridiculous. So when she had to go up again to tell the 2 girls to stop misbehaving, she'd pretty much had it. It was time to go to bed, and she wasn't in for any more discussions about it. So instead of finding the 2 girls beating each other up or roughhousing like they usually were, she found them cowering in a corner, clutching onto each other, and pointing at the chest of drawers, which was moving across the room by itself. Obviously, Peggy didn't believe that this was happening and told the girls to stop being so ridiculous. That was until she saw the drawers move themselves without anything pushing them or pulling them. She tried to move it once. It moved again. She tried to move it back a second time and it moved again. And the 3rd time she tried, it was like pushing against a brick wall. It wasn't going to move at all. It was like the chest of drawers were moving their way to the bedroom door to keep the girls trapped, and nothing could put the drawers back to where they were supposed to be. Terrified, they ran to their neighbour's house to see if they could help. The neighbours were Vic and Peggy Nottingham. The girls were dressed in their nightwear, scared out of their wits, and their neighbours opened the door to the commotion of this terrified family begging for help because this chest of drawers were moving by itself. Vic was a big man, proper 70s burly builder, masculine, you know the type. And even he was terrified of what was going on inside that house. He went in to explore and heard knocking in the girls' bedroom, across the ceiling, down the walls, like someone was playing a game. He was scared somebody was in the house, so he called the police. Margaret, who was 12 at the time, said she couldn't comprehend a man like Vic getting scared. And yet there he was, terrified out of his wits. The police came to visit the house, but they were equally confused about what was going on. WPC Caroline Heaps was called to the scene, and she saw a large armchair move across the room unassisted. She checked it for wires, wheels, anything that would prove it was a hoax. And yet she saw it lift a few inches off the ground, move 3 or 4 feet across the room, and stop, unassisted. Eventually, the police had to leave. There was no evidence of anyone breaking the law, so they couldn't do anything. So they had to go, leaving the family just as terrified as they were before. The press were the next call on the Hodgsons list. They needed somebody to help with what was going on in the house, and the press are known for investigating. So if they could get the message out to anybody who understood this kind of stuff, then they were going to take that opportunity. Daily Mirror photographer Graham Morris attended the scene and said, and I quote, "It was chaos. Things started flying around, people were screaming. Things were caught on camera, like Janet levitating and being thrown across the room. Whatever was in this house used the girls as the conduit, but mainly targeted Janet." The BBC reporters who visited the house found the metal in their devices bent out of shape and recordings completely erased, but no one had been near the footage apart from them. The Society for Psychological Research was next called. They sent Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair to visit the house. They later wrote the book This House is Haunted, all about the affair. In a later interview, Grosse said, and I quote, "As soon as I got there, I realised this case was real because everyone in the family was in a really bad state. Everybody was in chaos." He said that nothing had happened for a while whilst he was there, but it wasn't until Janet came downstairs where things like Lego bricks were being pelted across the room, and things like marbles were hot to the touch when you picked them up. Something had been moving these toys and burning them but nothing was around. Every poltergeist trick in the book was thrown that night. Sofas began to levitate. Furniture was spun around. The family were dragged out of their beds in the middle of the night. Things were thrown across the room. One day, Maurice was visiting the neighbour when they both ran back round to the house to find Janet on the floor crying out that something had got her leg. They had to wrestle with whatever it was to get this girl off the floor because something had pinned her down and nobody knew what it was. The knocking became a concern to investigators, and it didn't matter who investigated this house, the knocking was something that always concerned them. They couldn't get to the bottom of whatever it was making those noises. It would run across the ceiling and down the walls and play a game with whoever was in the house, disappearing, fading, getting louder, making sudden bangs. Whatever was in that house tried to terrify the living daylights of the people that were inside. The entire family had become so scared at one point that they all decided to sleep in the living room together, on mattresses on the floor, with the lights on, huddled in a heap.
Hello everybody, it's me, your boy.
It's you.
It's me, Super Shrimp.
Yeah.
Plug to my channel down below in the description.
A lot of the hauntings seemed to be happening around 11-year-old Janet. She went into unexplained trances, and at one point, the wrought iron fireplace in her bedroom was yanked off the wall by unseen forces. She was also seen levitating by several family members, just floating straight across the room. Janet said, and I quote, "She felt used by a force that nobody understands. I'm not sure the poltergeist was necessarily evil. It was almost as if it wanted to be a part of our family." She goes on to say that whoever it was haunting the house died there, didn't want to hurt them, it just wanted to be at rest. She felt that the only way it could communicate was through her and her sister Margaret. However, this entire case was thrown into disrepute by Janet claiming that a few of the occurrences were faked by her and her sister. They said they did this because they wanted to test the zeal of the investigators, to see if they really were who they said they were, and that they could tell what was really paranormal and what wasn't. She said every single time her and her sister faked something, the investigators could always tell that it was them and not the poltergeist. She also admits to using a Ouija board in the house, and that it was the start of all the paranormal activity in the house. Her and her sister used this Ouija board and unleashed whatever was in the home. But who was it in their house? Well, exactly like the film said it was elderly man Bill Wilkins. "Just before I died, I went blind, and then I had an hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died in the chair in the corner downstairs." That voice was the voice of Bill Wilkins, and that voice came from Janet Hodgson. This recording was taken years after his death and was taken during an interview with Janet. He appeared angry because his house had been taken away from him, and his living son at the time confirmed that this was exactly where his father had died and exactly how he had died. So what was it like to come face to face with a poltergeist? Well, BBC Radio 4 did a reunion show between everybody who lived in the house, everybody who investigated the house, from the policewoman to the neighbour to the family itself, to find out exactly what it was like to come face to face with this kind of entity. I have a few quotes here that I'm going to read and tell you exactly what it's like to be in the same building as a creature like this. Peggy, the mother, said, "I just couldn't believe it. In fact, I pushed it back twice and a third time and I couldn't move it." That was about the chest of drawers when she went up to check on her two daughters in the first place. Vic Nottingham, the neighbour, said, "I heard the knocking as soon as I walked in the front door. It was all over the house and I just couldn't make out what it was." WPC Caroline Heaps said about the chair that she saw levitating, "It came off the floor, maybe half an inch, I'd say, and I saw it slide about 3.5, 4 feet before it came to a rest." Graham Morris, the photojournalist for the Daily Mirror, said, "The last one to come in was Janet. when the family was all sleeping downstairs. Suddenly things just took off and started flying around the room. Maurice Gross, from the Society of Psychological Research, said, "I have actually seen, myself, marbles being thrown about. I have seen the door moving without any help. I have also experienced the reduction of temperature." He also asked the spirit once, "Are you having a game with me?" At which point he was struck with a cardboard box and a few pillows. Ros Morris, a BBC reporter, said after the girls went to bed, there was a very loud crash upstairs in their bedroom. Something had thrown a chair across the room. Something picked up a chair in the girls' room and threw it 9 feet across the floor. And it wasn't the girls because they couldn't lift the chair. Richard Gross, Maurice's son, said, "Every breakfast time my father would play a tape or two. It started off with noises, bangings. It moved on to banging in response to questioning." Bill Wilkins was recorded saying, "I am invisible because I am a GHOS." This case became so prominent that it caught the attention of famous paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now the film makes them portray a much bigger part in this case than they actually did, when in reality they turned up uninvited, stayed for a day, and then left. They did confirm entities in the house, however. Their brief stay didn't help towards the controversy of the case. The claims that the poltergeist haunting was a hoax led them to believe that the Warrens themselves were also hoaxes. The movie says that they were the main investigators, but that just means it fits the franchise better that way. They weren't really involved at all, and their backing really hurt the credibility of the case instead of adding to the Hodgson's claims. So let's have a look at movie versus reality. What really happened and what was made up for the film. Well, the people and the timing was real. This family was real and the neighbours were real. The experience of the neighbour coming into the house happened, and so did the calling of the police. The amount of crosses on the wall that turned upside down didn't happen. There was no such thing in the investigation. Ed and Lorraine Warren weren't involved nearly as much as the film said they were. According to Janet, the hauntings began when she started using the Ouija board. They released something into the house. And Janet believes that the hauntings quietened down in 1978 because of the visiting of a priest, not because of the Warrens. There was massive amounts of controversy surrounding this case. A lot of people said that this case wasn't real. In cases where they believed Janet was faking the voice, she would have to have her mouth filled with water, and then Bill Wilkins would speak through her. Even though he continued to speak through her, they still was convinced that she was faking. Bill Wilkins made everyone turn their back on Janet before she spoke, making a lot of people think she spat the water out to speak and then swallowed some more before she was seen again. And because Janet and Margaret admitted to faking 1 or 2 instances, that was enough for any skeptics to undermine the case completely. So what happened after the Hodgsons left? Well, Peggy stayed in the house until she died, and a family moved in after the death of Peggy Hodgson, Claire Bennett and her 4 sons. They left after 2 months when one of the sons ran into Claire's bedroom claiming that he had seen a man walking downstairs. That was enough for Claire, and she packed up the family and left. Another family currently live there, but the children don't know anything about the history of the house, and the mother is determined to keep it that way. Because of all the controversy surrounding the Enfield haunting, it is strange to say the least, but I do believe it. I do believe that this is something that happened, just because I believe in the paranormal. And that is something I believe. And I've watched, I've listened to exorcism tapes before, and they make me feel sick. There's a exorcism of Annalise Mitchell, and you hear whatever is speaking through her speak. And if you're listening to it, it does make you feel sick. It makes you feel really sick. And I've heard the voice of Bill Wilkins, and that also made me feel incredibly, incredibly ill. So I do believe, I believe that this happened. You can't levitate. You can't levitate without something making you do it. You can't throw furniture around without anything touching it. There is photographic proof that this is happening. There is recordings. There's all kinds of evidence. To me, I believe it. I don't know about you. That's a discussion I would love to have. I'm going on my boyfriend's podcast to discuss all of this kind of stuff. I will link him below. He does a podcast every Sunday called the Super Sunday Podcast, and every week he has a different topic and a different guest. I'm going to be on more than everybody else just because we're in the same house. It's easy to do that kind of thing. There'll be a true crime one, there'll be a supernatural one, there'll be other kinds of ones with us as well. But we're going to be having a real in-depth conversation about the paranormal and the supernatural and all that stuff, because I love these kinds of conversations. So if you believe in the paranormal, drop some stories below. Let me know what happened to you. If you've got any experiences, tell me. If your family has any experiences, tell me. My family has a few paranormal experiences. That's why I believe this kind of stuff. I also am relatively spiritual, so I believe in different kinds of entities, different kinds of powers. So I will be interested to see what you guys think of it. Let me know what you think about the Enfield haunting, because I would really like to know what you think, if it is a hoax in your opinion or not, what you thought of the Conjuring 2 film, and what you think of that franchise in general. I'm really intrigued by that franchise. I'm really intrigued by the Warrens and all sorts of other paranormal investigations. So talk to me in the below. I also talk about books, true crime, the supernatural. I'm a crime writer. This is a booktube channel, as well as all the dilly-dalliances elsewhere. Welcome. And if you like this kind of content, then subscribe, stick around. I would love to see you more. And I will see you next time.